Alright, so this is the Mind Place from Alan Wake 2. Tons of articles have been written about it, it even got its own GDC talk, and it's a big reason why Alan Wake 2 won Best Narrative at the Game Awards in 2023. But what makes this seemingly normal room so special? Well, it's deeply connected to the game's narrative design, and to really understand that, we need to take a closer look not just at the room itself, but at the game's entire approach to narrative design. See, when I was younger, I used to think narrative design is just a fancy way of saying the story of the game, but that's way off. Narrative design isn't just about what the story is, it's about how the game tells that story through its mechanics, making abstract ideas feel real and immersive. It's what transforms a bunch of random game systems into something meaningful, something that feels like it belongs in the world. And Alan Wake 2 is a masterclass in this. Let's break it down to make it easier to understand. Narrative design has two parts. One is the abstract and the other is the fiction. Sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. Take this for example. Imagine a bunch of pixels on a screen. When I press a button, they go up, then down. That's just movement, totally abstract. No meaning behind it. But now, let's say we take those pixels and dress them up as a plumber. Suddenly, that movement means something. Now it's not just pixels moving, it's a character jumping. And that character, they have a purpose, a story, and motivations that help the player feel connected to the game. The way the designers dress up these mechanics can make a character feel fast, sluggish, powerful, or weak. This is exactly what Florence does perfectly. This game is a masterpiece, and if you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend it. You can finish it in half an hour, and it's available everywhere. PC, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, mobile, you name it. But what makes Florence so special is how it tells a love story without dialogue. Instead, it uses mechanics to make you feel what the characters are going through. The mundane parts of life, they feel mundane. The mechanics are slow and repetitive, just like everyday routines. Going down memory lane? You literally scroll down a lane of memories. Childhood friends drifting apart? You move time forward and they physically drift away on screen. But the most powerful mechanics, at least for me, are in the conversation sequences. Florence tells its story through color and shape, not words. When Florence and Krish talk on their first date, the game makes you piece together a puzzle, just like she's piecing together what to say. But as they get more comfortable, the puzzle becomes easier, smoother, more intuitive, showing how natural their conversation is becoming. And that's what makes the game so special. It doesn't just tell you what's happening, it shows you. And more importantly, it makes you feel it. Instead of just reading words on a screen, you're engaging with emotions directly through mechanics. That is what great narrative design does. It takes abstract ideas and turns them into something you can experience. Alright, so what abstract idea does this room actually represent? Well, in Alan Wake 2, you play as Saga Anderson, an FBI agent with a unique ability. She pieces together her cases in her head, and that's exactly what this room is. It's not just a space, it's the inner workings of Saga's mind. But she's not the only one with a place like this. When you play as Alan Wake, he has a similar space too, a writer's room. Because, well, he's a writer. And that's the genius of it. These spaces aren't just cool set pieces, they mean something. They show the mental state of the characters and how they process the world around them. Where Alan rewrites reality with his plot board, Saga pieces it together with clues, because that's what a detective does. These rooms reflect their deepest thoughts, their way of thinking, and when something feels off in these spaces, the player immediately knows something is wrong, not because the game tells them, but because they feel it through the narrative design. The actual process of piecing clues together, it's not that deep. You get some information, you put it in the right spot on the board, and that's pretty much it. But that's by design. Early in development, the game actually had a more complex investigation system, something closer to Obra Dinn, where players had to figure out who the killer was and piece together the mystery themselves. But Remedy scrapped that idea because it didn't fit the game they were making. Alan Wake 2 isn't a full-on detective simulator. It's a narrative-first, light puzzle psychological horror game. If they had leaned too hard into the detective mechanics, it would have completely changed the experience. Instead of being fully immersed in the story, players would get caught up trying to solve complex puzzles. And that's not what Remedy wanted. They stuck to the design pillars, and honestly, I think that was the right call. Because at the end of the day, the game isn't about testing your detective skills, it's about making you feel like you are Saga Anderson. And the immersion? That's where Alan Wake 2's narrative design truly shines. To understand how the game pulls this off, we need to talk about diegetic design. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. When something in a game can be perceived by both the player and the character, it's diegetic. Think about movie soundtracks. Most of the time, the characters can't hear the epic orchestral score playing in the background. That's just for the audience. That's non-diegetic. The same goes for most UI elements in games. Health bars, ammo counters, objective markers, these things exist for the player, but the character in the game doesn't actually see them. But some games do things differently. Take Half-Life, for example. Gordon Freeman's health isn't just some floating number. It's displayed on his suit's interface, something he would actually see. Or Dead Space. Instead of a traditional health bar, Isaac's health is displayed through glowing lights on his suit. His ammo count, it's a holographic display on his gun. These aren't just UI elements, they exist within the game world itself. That's what diegetic design is about. Integrating these elements in a way that makes the world feel more immersive, more believable. And Alan Wake 2 does something really interesting with this concept. Now, it doesn't actually use diegetic UI. So you might be wondering, why am I even bringing this up? Well, let's go back to the room and look at what it actually does. In the Mind Place, Saga has access to the caseboard, where she can see all the clues she's found. She can also remind herself of what she needs to do next. In a way, the room functions like the game's journal. It's where the player sees what the next objective is and also tracks what they've already accomplished. Now, here's the thing. Most games use a menu to do this, right? You open a menu and boom, there's your quest log. But in Alan Wake 2, they turned that idea into a space you can actually walk through. Instead of just looking at a list on a screen, you're physically navigating a space, making the whole process feel immersive in a way that's way more engaging. This change, making a typically non-diegetic element into something you can interact with in-game, feeds right into the game's supernatural vibe and makes everything feel so much more connected. Alan Wake 2 uses this concept of turning non-diegetic elements into in-game elements all the time. For example, while most games would use cutscenes that break up the gameplay, Alan Wake 2 keeps things flowing with light puzzles and diegetic cutscenes as rewards. This way, it feels like the character is solving the puzzle, not just the player. And speaking of immersion, there are two concerts in the game that aren't just for the player. They're for the characters too. It is moments like these that show how the game uses more than just dialogue to tell its story. The mechanics themselves are part of the narrative. The story isn't something the player just watches, it's something that the characters live through every step of the journey. One of the things Remedy does so well is immerse the player by removing as many non-diegetic elements as possible. They've designed the game to keep you in the world as much as possible, with natural stopping points built into the chapters. Now, these chapter breaks do create natural pauses where the players could feel disconnected from the characters, but the game keeps you connected to the experience through its beautiful use of music, and allowing you to sit with the emotions of what just happened and bridge the gap until you dive back in. So this seemingly simple room, it actually represents something deeply meaningful for the characters and gives that meaning to the players too. What we are looking at is the quest log, but instead of just being a list of objectives, it's turned into a whole playable space. And the best part? It's all just a single button press away. This is where the power of narrative design really shines. It turns something so familiar and often overlooked into a fresh, immersive experience. What makes this room from Alan Wake 2 stand out? It's about how the story is told, and how the mechanics serve that narrative in a way that feels unique to the game. It's something that can't just be copied from one game to the next, and that's what makes this space so special. Alright, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You get an imaginary bowl of butter chicken today, so enjoy that. And yeah, don't forget to leave a like if you like the video, and sub if you want to hear me talk more about games and game design, and I'll see ya.